Hello, and welcome. Welcome to this episode of the Four Thinkers Talk series. My name is Dr. Ivo Pezzuto. I'm a professor of global economics and competitiveness at ISM Paris and the founder of Ivo Pezzuto Forward Thinking Lab. In this space, we generally invite prominent and emerging entrepreneurs, thought leaders, company leaders, and visionary innovators. And to express their ideas about the emerging business models and technologies. Today, I'm particularly honored and thrilled to have as a guest a renowned innovation expert, Efosa Ojomo. Efosa is the director of Global Prosperity Research Group at Clayton Christensen Institute for Disruptive Innovation, a think tank based in Boston and Silicon Valley. So, Efosa, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ivo. It's great to be here. Very excited for the conversation.
Evo is enough. No, no doctor, no doctor, not.
Sounds good.
No
Sounds
doctor. Great to see you again. I recall, I had immense pleasure of meeting you a few years ago as I invited you to as a guest lecturer to one of my disruptive innovation courses. So that my students still remember that incredible lasting impact that you left in their minds on innovation transformative power. But I don't think Efosa needs much introduction in addition to what I've said, but perhaps it's just important to state that he is a very famous, influential thought leader on innovation and prosperity. And as we said, he leads the Global Prosperity Group at Clayton Christensen Institute. He is also very known for this co-authoring the book Prosperity Paradox, How Innovation Can Lift Nations Out of Poverty, which of course he wrote with Clayton Christensen, famous, legendary Harvard professor, and Karen Dillon, the former editor of HBR, Harvard Business Review. As most people know, the groundbreaking work that they done is really a turnaround for economic research, offering fresh insight and practical strategies on how to transform, to alleviate poverty, unlock prosperity, and drive sustainable development in impoverished regions of the world through market-creating innovations. In a nutshell, Prosperity Paradox, it's really, it's really a very, very innovative approach in addressing some of the big problems of society. So basically, to put in simple words, Efosa and his colleagues are people with a big purpose, in life, to solve societal problems, to help eliminate or reduce poverty, and to make this a better world. Engineer by training with an MBA from Harvard Business School. He's a professor. At the time we met, you were lecturing at Harvard Business School. Now I think you're teaching at Northwestern University. And he's been involved with everything, numerous TED Talks, Aspen Ideas Festivals, World Bank, Harvard, Yale, Oxford, and many other famous things. So Efosa, sorry for the long introduction. It was really well deserved. Could you tell us things that I have not said, because I said so many things about things that I have not said yet? Can you tell us, how did you start your journey to becoming the director of Global Prosperity Research Group at Clayton Christensen Institute? What are the defining moments of and experiences that sculptured your career, particularly when you started to create the Poverty Stop Here organization, and most of all, your great inspiring collaboration with one of the most influential person of the history of management, which is Clayton Christensen?
Thank you, Ivo. I think it was Steve Jobs who said you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You only have to, are able to do that looking back. And I think that statement exemplifies a lot of what has happened in my life and how I've gotten to do this work at the Christensen Institute. Um, it all started one day when I was walking with a friend into a bookstore, and he was going to buy a book called The Bottom Billion on poverty, development, economics, and so on. And I don't know why, but I just had a feeling to buy a copy of the book as well. Um, I was an engineer at the time. This wasn't of particular interest to me. It wasn't like I read books of the sort. I just purchased it, and since that day, I've not been able to put either books down or rid myself of interest in figuring out how we can make the world a better place. So after reading that book, I read a few others, and as you mentioned, started an organization, Poverty Stops Here, because the fact that there were just hundreds of millions of people in the world struggling. I thought, I have to do something about it, and we started Poverty Stops Here, and then that experience led me back to school, and so I went to business school, where I had the great fortune to meet Clay Christensen, and after graduating, uh, him and I worked together until he passed away in January 2020, and so I will say it was just a series of fortuitous events that led me to where I am today. And at the core of what we are really trying to do at the Christensen Institute is take a step back and ask, what are the causal mechanisms behind prosperity, and how can we ignite these in poorer countries? And much of our research has landed on a type of innovation called market creating innovations. And I'll go into details on what that is, but that just sort of gives you a sense for how I got here. It wasn't like when I was a kid, I had always wanted to do this work or had a passion for this. Um, Walked into a bookstore, purchased a book, and read the book, and then my life really was transformed. And so I think, I would say, to many people listening, I wouldn't discount some of the experiences in our lives that may seem incredibly mundane and superficial, and maybe even meaningless. How many times have you walked into a bookstore? How many times have you, strolled down the road with a friend discussing? And so things like that could have the potential to transform our lives if we are open to engaging with them.
Absolutely, and I think it's sometimes, like in this case, thank you very much for your contribution. Some reading, some books, some even your speech. At this moment, they can have an impact, a lasting impact in people's mind, especially in a society not like the one we live. That sometimes it tends to be too busy, and we don't have the time to stop and think about the purpose of our life.
That's
Or
true.
sometimes we want to have a bigger purpose than ourselves. We want to have something that fits our soul, not
That's
just.
true.
So in that sense, I think that that's really impressive. So regarding the prosperity paradox, of course, we don't have too much time to go to dive deeper on this thing, but you mentioned correctly the market creating innovation as a core concept in this theory, in this strategy. Um, so the one thing I wanted to ask you is, how do you see this paradox implemented today in the world we are today, and in helping our economies and even the developing countries to improve, growth and prosperity for the for the common good or for the broader benefits of society. In other words, how can this theory, this model, and this strategy connected with the today transformative technologies we have. We talk about generative AI, we talk about AI, we talk about digital transformation,
blockchain.
blockchain, and AR, VR, and all the other stuff about smart cities and everything that we know about Internet of Things and so on and so forth. How all this breakthrough, innovative, high potential technology really connect with your strategy to create a better world, but also to make sure that the benefits of this uh, improve life of many and not just
Yeah,
of the few privileged ones.
absolutely. I think the first thing is really just appreciating how visible poverty is, especially in poorer countries, lower income countries, middle income countries. Poverty is the kind of thing that when you encounter it, it hits you in the face and it hits you hard. You you travel to a low income country and you see instantly the infrastructure is different. Some of the institutions set up are different than you would experience in wealthy countries. The roads, the ports, the bridges, the airports, and so on, the schools, healthcare. And so there is sort of an inclination, a natural inclination to want to provide resources to just fix those things, to fix the road or build the road, fix the port or build a port, education, fix the school, build a school, whatever, without slowing down, stepping back, and saying, what is the mechanism that will sustain this investment? Does the ecosystem, which is a word that is often used, but really it is really the components necessary to keep this investment going. Does it exist here? Is there enough value we can create by investing in this? Is that value enough to keep it going? And that level of thinking often doesn't happen, not because people are, not smart. I mean, people are incredibly intelligent. It's because of how visible poverty is. And so I think there is a tendency to jump to the outcome we want to see without slowing down and saying, what's the solution that will make the outcome incredibly sustainable?
Yeah,
And so we have to appreciate that. Now, in terms of connecting that idea to the proliferation of new technologies, seemingly transformative technologies, some of which you've mentioned. Um, the first thing I will say, which is a shameless plug, we just published a two-part series on AI, or Gen AI's potential for global prosperity. And and some of the ideas I'll share here were in that series. Well, the first is we have to understand, or at the very least appreciate, how transformative technologies, what many experts will call general purpose technologies, have transformed people's lives in the past. So the internal combustion engine, the steam engine, the microprocessor, the internet, these are general purpose technologies. How have they transformed people's lives in the past, right? Because understanding that gives us a clue. Doesn't give us the answer on what AI is going to do or what mRNA is going to do and so on, but it gives us a clue. That's first. The second is when we actually look at how these technologies have transformed people's lives, we will see that technologies that were embedded in a business model, and there's a very specific definition of business model, wouldn't go into that now, but in a business model that targets what in our language we call non consumption. Um, these are the vast majority of people who don't have access to a product or service because of certain barriers. Because of money, it's too expensive. Because of time, it takes too much time for me to consume the product. Because of skill, For me to consume a product, I need to either be literate. I need to understand how it works and the mechanisms of the actual product, service, partners. Yeah, it's just too complicated. So that's a barrier. And then the last one is access. It's just not available where I am. Maybe I can consume it, but it's just not easily accessible. So that limits my consumption. These are the primary barriers of consumption. And when you have a business model that targets non consumption, specifically trying to reduce these barriers, leveraging these technologies you mentioned, and we can actually get a shot at global prosperity. We can get a shot at improving people's lives, generating significant returns for investors, but that often doesn't happen, at least not on a global stage. So if you look at globally, the only technology that has actually proliferated the world, like everywhere, is the mobile phone. It's the sort of global telecommunications. If you look at the diffusion of global telecommunications globally, you will see there is almost little difference between the diffusion rates in the US and, say, in Ghana, or Bangladesh. Now, obviously, most people in Nigeria are not running around with smartphones or Apple phones. That's expensive. But what I'm talking about is the ability to connect with another human being with a device over the airwaves. That is one of the most proliferated technologies. And if you see what happened, the innovators focused on non-consumption. Most other technologies are available to people in wealthy countries and a few people in poor countries, maybe the wealthier folks or, upper middle income folks.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, yeah,
So no, I thank you very much. This is really impressive with the way you were able to summarize it. Very, very impactful, very eye-opening. Creating innovations. You said very clear. Mobile uh, innovations that can embed technology, can embed innovative business model that can drive, distribution of spreading of this innovation to larger audience and targeting business model targets non-consumption, which is the broader,
mhm,
in order to get to the democratization of the
yeah,
benefits in this state. So, in this sense, reconnecting to your paradox, prosperity paradox model, the concept of attracting investments, attracting the market, is developing the market from the demand instead and from just aids, financial aids, whatever. In other words, the pull, push or pull strategy, in which you advocate a pull strategy which involves creating demand through innovation, attracting investments, and building infrastructures over time or ecosystem that enable that. So, what is how from your experience, from what you've seen around the world, all your projects, how do you build the infrastructure, the capabilities, the leadership that allows to drive, visionary, forward-thinking, forward-looking business models that can embed the technology and generate this, creating these new markets from, maybe the demand, creating the demand in a way that the idea is there, technology is there, but then it doesn't pick up because there is not enough demand, or because they cannot afford, or because there are those barriers you mentioned before. How do you remove those barriers? How do you make sure you get a critical mass of the demand or the stakeholders involved to create that ecosystem, those infrastructures, remove the barriers and unleash growth?
yeah. I mean, I think every entrepreneur would appreciate this, and I think this is not news to them. It all starts with the struggle. It sounds simple, but if you really slow down, Evo, and think about your life, every day, every almost every hour is a series of struggles that you overcome. Some of those struggles are as simple as, oh, I wake up in the morning and there's a struggle of having to have clean dentals, and so I need to brush my teeth. Some of the struggles are I'm going to a meeting and I have to put some clothes on that represent what I want to be looked at as in the meeting. And so you have clothes for that struggle. I have to get from my home to the school where I teach. So I need transportation. But then some struggles are much bigger. I need a home. I need to buy a home. I need to buy a car. I need to travel on vacation with the family. Life, if you really slow down, is a series of overcoming struggles. You get hungry in the afternoon. Well, you have to eat lunch. So every single company that's worth its weight in anything starts with what is the struggle? Now, when you understand the struggle, and you only understand this by crawling into the life of the non-consumers, the people who are going through the struggles, and really observing, engaging, empathizing, asking questions without judgment, then you can move on to what potential solutions can we come up with. And this is where you pilot things, you try things. I think the lean startup model provides a few ideas here, but this is where you're really getting a sense as does this product or service help solve the struggle? And that's where we, in our research, we get into understanding the job to be done.
Yeah.
Like why, yeah. And then the next thing is what type of company do I need to build in order to create the product that solves this struggle, that accomplishes the job to be done? And you had talked about a couple of things like financing and leadership. Those two things are incredibly important. One of the things that we're finding is many large market creating innovating companies, they got their start by getting their financing from um, friends and family, at least the initial seed capital. It's incredibly difficult, not impossible, but just difficult to get market creating companies um, whose initial capital is from institutional type investors. It's really hard, and at least that's what our research is showing us so far, just based on some. We've looked at a few large companies in different sectors and seen, oh wow, many of them got their start from, this uncle gave me some money to start, or I took some of my savings, and so on. The second is well, before I go to the second, what the implication of that is not only do you need patient capital, you need capital that understands its purpose. The purpose here is to serve the non-consumers, to do what I have to do to serve people who don't have access. And that's incredibly important because when you have capital that doesn't understand that, the capital is impatient, it wants returns quickly, it's asking you questions. Why are you going after this? Why are you building this? Why are you go? We need asset light strategies. Why are you building a manufacturing plant or a warehouse? So that's tough when you're trying to create a market. The other one is leadership, which you talked about. Creating a market is one of the most difficult things I think a human being can do. One could argue there's almost no logical reason why you should do it, because many of the people who start to do it are people who don't have to do it. There are people who maybe tend to be a bit wealthy, tend to be um, have decent status in life, or have options. And so you now have to look at what kind of leadership attributes are actually necessary for market creation to occur. And again, this is some initial work we've started doing. Um, Four come to mind. The first is love. And love is a word that has so many different meanings to different people today. And so I need to define it and ground it in this meaning. It's the ability for someone to work for the benefit of another person or a place or a product or a process, um, often at the expense of themselves. Often at the expense of themselves. And so that's how we define love. It's not passion, it's not a good feeling in my heart. Oh, I love this job. I love it many times it is costly, it is sacrificial, but the focus is how can I make this product better? How can I make this process better? How can I make these people have access? So love is a necessary condition. Humility is another necessary condition. Why? Well, humility is necessary as a leadership attribute because you're doing something you've never done before. Many people have never done before. So you have to be humble enough to learn from the innovation process. What is this teaching me? What are our pilots teaching me? And so you don't go in with the answer. You go in with questions, with a heart of learning, a spirit that says, I think this is the right thing to do, but I'm not 100% sure. Let's test it. Um, the third is faith. When you faith again is a word that may have different meanings for different people, but it is an ability to conceive of the world differently than it currently is and work to make it happen. And so faith isn't just this sort of blind belief and hope that something will happen. It is an ability to see people today who cannot afford mobile phones, who cannot afford decent health care, who cannot afford a 2 week vacation to just hang out with their families. And it's your ability to see the world that way, that people can now consume these things, and then you work to make it happen. So it's necessary because if you don't have faith, there are just so many naysayers that will say it's not possible, it will never happen. And dare I say, the biggest naysayer might be yourself, you not believing. The last one, the last attribute is it's an ability, it's systems thinking. You are not creating a product or a service. You are creating a system. And so when you begin to ask yourself, why is it that, the average person in Bangladesh or Namibia or somewhere does not have access to, call it, decent surgical care? You say, okay, it's because there are no surgeons. So you want to start training surgeons. Well, you want to start training surgeons, but then how are people going to pay for surgical care? You have to think about that. Oh, but then how are people going to pay for surgical care? But what about all the equipment that you need in an operating theater? You have to think about that. So you're not just in the business of training surgeons. You are in the business of creating an ecosystem where the average person in Bangladesh or wherever now has access to surgical care. And it requires you to have that kind of systems thinking mind. And when you look at market creating innovators, that's what you see. From Henry Ford to the Apple when it was creating the personal computer. They at the initial onset, they had to take on so much more of the components in what we call the value network. Um, which is essentially upstream, downstream suppliers and partners who are helping make this this industry, if you will, available, affordable, sustainable, and you have to take on so much more. You don't have the luxury of modularization or outsourcing at the outset. And so when you look at these attributes, it is so difficult um, for market creation. But it also gives you a sign that it's incredibly powerful if you're able to do it, and totally worthwhile.
You feel you are creating an impact, a positive impact. You're changing something, the business, the world, the
Absolutely.
people around you, affecting like you when you started building wells in Nigeria for
Well,
healthy.
yeah, well, I did not have these attributes at all. And dare I say, I didn't, because if I did, I would have done
But
better.
that was a good start, so that's why you are here. That was a good
I
start.
suppose. You're very kind. You're very kind.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Ifosa, it was a blessing to have you here. You're just an inspiration, not just visionary leaders. I think when we talk about leadership, people have just to listen to you. And I had the goose pimples, so I'm sure all the others will have the same. But you are an
thank you.
impressive person, and I think that's where it starts. Now that we talk about technology, transformative technology, as long as I'm very excited and passionate about what is happening, but I do believe, which is that you still need leaders and teams and people to envision and embrace these values that drive the innovation in the right direction, which is
Absolutely.
for the society. So thank you for everything you're doing and for the time you dedicated to us. It's really wonderful having you had here, and I hope we'll have a chance to meet again. All the best for your projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a
Thank you
lot.
so much, Ivo. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks again. Have a nice day.
So I grew up in Nigeria. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. But it wasn't until I was 25 years old that I visited a poor community for the first time. Now, on my way to the village, I took this picture, and I saw a group of women washing clothes by the banks of a river. I came to find out that they didn't have water in their community, and these women and their kids would walk miles every day just to get access to water. Instantly, I knew the answer to the problem. Start an organization and build a well. And that's what I did. So I got some friends together, we raised some money, we started an organization, and we built a well. It was glorious.